All right. Well, welcome to another Run Wild with Us, and you can ask us anything. I'm Lisa Kastner. I am the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and Rise, and I am here with you, typically with some of our amazing acquisition editors, to answer any questions that you may have. This is actually a really, really great forum if you are an aspiring author, an author that's interested in working with a small press. If you are an aspiring editor or an editor who would like to work with a small press, if you are curious in general about the story, honestly, if you just want to understand more from a business process or a business perspective, the storytelling industry, this is actually a really great venue for that. Also, it doesn't really matter what genre or what type of writing that you are interested in or storytelling you're interested in. I want to say that among all of us, we have actually a really great representation across multiple genres, multiple forms, anything from poetry to short stories, novella, novelettes, full-length work, memoir, creative nonfiction. We actually have quite a bit of experience among all of us. So how does this work? I'm sure you're like, oh my gosh, you just told me all this stuff. Like, why do I care? Okay, so this is how it works. What you're going to do is you are going to toss your questions into the comment section of whatever venue you are watching this. And so we are currently on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and then oftentimes we will then also repost on TikTok so that you can have a chance to check things out later on. Now, let's say you're watching this, it's after the fact, and you're like, well, how's this like benefit me? Because I'm now watching it after she already talked about all this stuff. Well, we still actually do check our videos for any kind of comments. I actually get an email that lets me know when someone's added a comment to one of our videos so that I can then go back, check, and what we do is we typically will then bring forward any unanswered questions. So one thing that I want you to note, we used to have this on Thursdays and we have moved them to Wednesdays between 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So if that's a little late for you, or excuse me, if you have other things going on, again, not a big deal. You can just go ahead and toss your questions into that comment section, and then we will do our best to answer them. So I think that's pretty much the gist of it. And now we have one of our phenomenal editors, Mr. Ben, or Ben, as he is better known. So how are you doing this week, young man?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah? What have you been working on?
Working on a novel. Got it down to about 80 pages for the first time through. So it's progressing. Talked to the author. She's following me behind, running through it. Mm-hmm. And then started working on the poetry anthology, the first ever.
Wow.
And starting to, haven't accepted any yet, but making choices because some people submitted more than one. So we may take one of the ones they submitted, but not all. So we're making those decisions before we let them know what we're actually doing.
How many submissions did you guys get?
Oh, it shook out. It says 75, but I think it's 69 once the withdrawals are taken care of.
Wow.
And then, but that's just that's the number of poets we've gotten. But of course, like I said, they've submitted multiple poems because we accepted up to 5. We said send us 5 of your best, and so that would, I don't think, not everybody did 5 poems, but 60 times 5 would be what is that, 300? So it's quite a few to go through.
Wow. Wow, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Do you already have like some favorites?
There's some good stuff. I haven't been through them all to say favorites yet, because as soon as I do that, they'll be bumped.
It could be. They'll turn around and say, I don't want to be in this anymore.
Yeah. We've got some good stuff that I've marked as yes, and then some maybe yeses and some no's, but just the process. Trust the process. And Peter and I are both going through them, so I'm sure we'll need to have a discussion or discussions.
Got it. Oh, that's so cool. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a kickoff for our Running Wild and our Rise novella anthologies on Saturday. So that'll be cool to get that up and running.
Yeah.
And I just volunteered myself to edit a memoir. So I'm just waiting for the author to set up time with me so that, he can better understand my editing process and answer whatever questions he has. So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
And I'm finishing up a poetry collection. I'm just waiting for the final thumbs up from the poets that they're good with it and we can move on to the production stage. So,
nice.
Yeah. Lots going on. We never lack stuff.
Hello.
Hey, Peter.
Waiting on me to get there.
What's everybody chuckling about today?
The fact that we've always got plenty of stuff going on.
That's true. Very true.
So what are you up to? Ben was telling us about the poetry submissions.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I need to go through those. I'm finishing up the editing of the latest book that I've got for Curtis Smith. It's going really well. I got some great suggestions, some great ideas I think could really make the book a lot much better. Very much better. So.
Hey, a lot much, whatever.
There you go. A lot much. Tired. Been a long week already, even though this is only halfway through.
Monday, and by end of day Monday, I was like, oh my gosh, it's only Monday? Seriously?
I know. Not everybody has the rock star life that Ben has.
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, there can only be one real rock star among all of us, and we all know who that is. So
it's true. It's true.
He's so humble.
He is.
It's always Friday here.
Caroline says, good evening, Lisa, Ben, and Peter. Good evening, Caroline. As always, fabulous to see you. Thank you so much for coming out or sitting home. I don't know, whatever it is that gets you here. So what are you guys excited about? Are there any projects that you're working on that you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing? It's like, no.
Spot put on. Not exactly. I'm still working my way through my novel and finding different ways to mess with the main character, which is always fun. Sometimes I forget how much fun it can be to write stuff into a story, and then 4 or 5 pages later, a part of your brain just says, hey, what if we try this? And what was once one situation is completely turned over on its end for the other situation, and where one group of people was thinking, ha, 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 we're better than you. Now the other people are like, ha, 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 we're better than you. And the reason why that is, it makes such perfect sense. It's like, where did I come up with this stuff? It's just awesome. I just really enjoy doing stuff like that. And that's what keeps the writing fun, keeps the writing going.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Days it's just work in the trenches, but every once in a while I can like, oh my God, that's funny. That's good. Hey, if you're impressed with your own writing, that's half the battle, right?
Again, humble.
I'm not saying anybody else is going to find it clever. I find it clever.
Hey, man, all good.
But you can convince yourself that you can't be that far off from everybody else.
That's true. Mhm. You can convince yourself that, you know what, this is the most brilliant thing I have ever read. Just remember not to go back and read it again like a week later, because you may surprise yourself.
Don't go back and fix it.
Don't go back and fix it. And don't submit it anywhere either, because you may surprise yourself.
Because you know the editor won't appreciate it at all.
No.
You know they are.
Gosh, they're awful.
Poison pens. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got to attend the kickoff for Kate's Alterations novel that we published. It officially went. It was officially available as of last night, and she had a full house, which was great. A lot of LA's or Los Angeles, in case anyone doesn't know that we're out of LA, or I'm out of LA. A lot of LA's like literary community came out, and she's a graduate of Antioch, and a lot of people from the Antioch school came out, and I believe she also teaches at Antioch now. So it was a real, I mean, like standing room only turnout. So it was fabulous. They sold out of her book, which was
cool,
wonderful. Yeah.
Was it in a bookstore?
Yeah, it was in I'm gonna say this wrong. Chevalier's bookstore. It's like the oldest running Chevalier's bookstore. It's the oldest running bookstore in Los Angeles. And here is a link to it. It's very, very cool. A lot of like fun stuff in there. And actually, I got there early, and there was this adorable mom with her child. And what the mom did is took her daughter over to like the kids section and was like, "Okay, pick your favorite book." And I guess that was like the treat for the week, you know. And so she picked a book that was also a puzzle. And she was so excited to get this like puzzle book, you know, like it was really adorable. So, Rodney Hatfield says, "Hey all, I have a couple of questions from Piggybacked my questions from last week." Okay. What common mistakes do you see in submissions that immediately make you pass on a manuscript? And then for new authors, what's one piece of advice you wish more writers knew before submitting? Why don't we go with Ben first, or Ben first?
I think what makes me immediately pass is overwriting, because I talk a lot about overwriting and trying to make the scene too almost poetic, but it just doesn't fit the scene. So when I see that, that's a red flag for me. And then of course I think we all three look for that immediate hook into the story, you know, get us interested. And when we don't have that, and you keep reading 20 pages in and there's still why am I reading this? And what's the purpose of all this activity going on? Give me that hook. Mm-hmm. And for new authors, what one piece of advice you wish more writers knew before submitting? They should mature.
Okay.
they should mature. Especially with the short story anthologies. I see a lot of and I don't mean that as a knock, because we all went through it. I've got stacks of stuff that wasn't mature, and at the time I thought it was this is the greatest stuff ever. But then as you mature in life, your writing comes along with you, and you know, whoops, I should go back and fix those. But so just if you're young and it's with some of your first submissions, the advice would be not to take it to heart that it didn't get picked up. And I shared with y'all that back in October, I had a short story that was picked up in 2024 that I had written in 1986.
Wow.
Don't give up on it.
Cool. How about you, Peter?
That's good advice. Very good. I would say that the maturity thing is good. The things I look for in a novel or submission is, does the writing go anywhere? Do we have reason to care about the characters? Are they humble? Are they, what's their need? Why are we reading this story? Does the character need something? Are you throwing in unnecessary detail because that's how it was when it happened to you? I mean, do you understand what the reader is looking for when they're reading your story? I mean, are you giving them a world? Are you giving them place? Are you giving them action so that they can see, touch, hear, feel, and smell the environment, especially in the first few pages, because that way you engage the reader very quickly and involve them in the story with all five senses as soon as you can, or as well, at least to include them when you can. When authors fail to do this, when they go off on too many tangents or they try to be too elaborate or too embellished, they're losing the point of the story, in my opinion. I think that they're trying too hard, and they're shooting for the Pulitzer, and nobody's going to pick up the book because it's too hard to get through. Instead of a nice, clean, level field, we're walking through thickets and grass and bogs and marsh, and it's all rich in there, but it doesn't make any sense with the story, if that kind of makes sense in terms of an allegory sort of way. And my advice is similar to Ben's in terms of submissions for young writers. I encourage you to keep with it. Persistence. Always keep with it, because if you stop, you're done. Okay. Mm-hmm. The stuff that I wrote in the 80s, I wouldn't even burn. It's that bad. For Ben to have something published for so long ago, I mean, that's fantastic. That's a heck of an achievement. But I've enjoyed every step of this learning process that I've gone through. And yeah, has my feather's been ruffled a little bit? Has my skin been a little hot to the touch after getting a rejection when I was sure it was going to be accepted? Of course. I mean, we're people, but you can't take it personally because it's not personal. It's about the words. It's about the story. I'll tell you a piece of how I learned to separate myself from my first story. So my first professional class was at a university in Chicago. It was a certificate program, and I sat down. I had 80 pages of this novel that I just thought was just sweet. It was really good stuff. I loved it. I got to submit first. Everybody else had been through a whole year worth of classes with this teacher, and this is my first time, and I'm going to knock them on their asses. They're going to love it. Oh, my God. It was a blitzkrieg. They ripped it to pieces. The teacher was laughing. A couple of the students were laughing. I mean, laughing, like uproariously. Like, how could you submit this drivel? And I just went home so shell-shocked. My wife was out of town. I sat on the floor in the living room, and I just kind of sat there and go, this will never be this personal again. It's just not me. It's just the words. So that when Lisa was saying she's really scared when she hands her stuff to the editor, I understand that. But at the same time, it's like, take it, do with it what you can, make it better. That's not me. I'm here. These are my words. So I hope that helps, Rod.
Yeah, and to piggyback on both Peter and Ben, in terms of like the first thing that will make me pass on a manuscript, lately we've been getting a lot of the first 5 pages, it doesn't do anything. It's like it's as if someone just kind of regurgitated on a page what they were initially thinking, and then just started writing from there. But none of it connects. None of it has anything to do with anything. Neither Peter nor Ben have seen these because I just give the author, I hope polite feedback, and then, they know, so no one else has to see it. But, always, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. And also always try and read this. Like if you finish something and you're like, my God, this is brilliant, or my God, this is crap. Either way, just put it away for like 24 hours and then go back and read it or read it aloud, or if you don't have access to someone who can be a reader for you. And when I say a reader, I don't mean this is someone who is necessary. They don't have to have an MFA. They don't have to aspire to be a writer or an editor. in reality, oftentimes your best readers are simply people who are really into that type of writing, right? So if you are if you're writing a mystery, find someone who loves mysteries. If you're writing a thriller, find someone who loves thrillers. If you're writing a literary work, that just means it's character driven. So you've got like the emotions of what the characters are going through within it. Then find people who are really into literary work and ask them to read it for you. And then that way you have a bit more, back to Peter's point, you have a little bit more emotional separation between what you initially put on the page and what you will then later send out to the world. You know, I want to say like every professional writer I know, they have a reader of some sort. It may be a friend, it could be an assistant, it could be their wife or their husband. You know, it could be a buddy from some kind of MFA program or from a conference or something. But everybody I know has someone who acts as a reader. And that is absolutely invaluable because, to Peter's point, and actually Ben's point, you know, you don't know if you've got dribble or not, right? You know, you may, like I just finished the initial like 35 pages of the next novel I'm working on. And when I finished this narrative arc, like I put myself to tears. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that's how it ends. And by the way, I do actually have a structure to it along with like key plot points. So that's a whole nother thing. Now I'll make you a bet when I go back and like when I'm done the initial draft and I start filling it in, you know, and like, because I write myself notes like, you know, go back and do this, or you have to research this, or, you know, were there automatic pistols in 1920? No, there weren't, just so you know. You know, things like that. Then I'll, you know, when I do another read through, I know me. I'm going to be like, wow, this was complete crud. What was I thinking when I thought this was fabulous, right? But again, if when you finish something and you've done a ton of work to it and you're just not sure, that is also why having that third-party reader is completely invaluable. So
I agree with giving yourself time between drafts also. Put it down for 24 hours, put it down for a week, then go back and revisit it fresh. So you can look at it with fresh eyes, fresh attitude, a little bit more, you know, maturity, looking at what you wrote, and you're more objective about it.
So the novel I put down a year and a half ago, I should be really ready to go.
Wait, when you finished, it's done?
No, I just put it away.
Oh, you're like, I'm not doing this anymore.
But it's been a year and a half. Let's just hope for it now.
Okay. All right. Whatever works, man. Whatever works. Well, Rodney, hopefully that was helpful because we all just kind of blathered on, but it was interesting because there were Kate, the author whose signing I went to the other night. She got a lot of really interesting questions, like how do you select point of view? How do you decide on, you know, what are going to be some key plot points, and how do you decide on things like the time period something's going to be set in and the details that you're going to provide. So guess what? I just asked you two both that.
Dartboard. That's a good question because, I mean, the point of view is really interesting because it tells you how much you're going to be able to get into the character's mind, how much or how little. And sometimes distant third is best because you can see the whole environment without getting too close to anyone. But then you take a chapter where you're in a character's head and then you see it from inside their world. And playing with those different levels, you know, or those different points of view can be fascinating in terms of for storytelling, just to vary things up. Others, I find personally, first person point of view is hard to pull off. First person point of view present, which is actually the book that I'm working on now. because everything's got to be happening right now in real time. There's memories, there's flashbacks, but nothing is it's not what happened in the past. So they're encountering it for the first time. It's tough. It can be done, as this author is proving to me very well, but it is tough in terms of deciding when time. Depends on how much of that environment I want to include in the story itself. What does the story need for tools, for imagination, for environment, for it to be fully a whole world within itself,
Cool.
And I've seen it. It's got to be right, and I was reminded of two of our novels. One's forthcoming, but Far Out, Khalid's book, with the character with the head injury who was flashing back to the 60s because she was an actress and the last script she read was about a detective from the 60s. So when she got the head injury, that's where she went. So it had to not only be right for the 60s, it had to be right for the 2020s and transition back and forth. So if that takes a little extra research, then make it worth it, because you got to get the cars right, you got to get the clothes right, you got to get the language right, the dialogue right, and then you got to bring it back to where all that was in the past, and here we are in the present.
Right.
And the other one, the forthcoming one, is when you flash back to the 70s and the Vietnam veterans are in a homeless camp, you can't have female Iraqi veterans there with them. Or cell phones. You can't have cell phones there with them. And unless you're just really going for the absurd and you have some fun with it, then that might work. But that's not what this book was trying to do. It was just wrong. And so we had to edit it and make it right. And those are some structural issues of just the time frame. And that's where being older
Now you're the first one.
gives you the advantage, because you're remembering stuff, especially with poetry, because it doesn't have to be as detailed. It just has to be the way it was, and for that individual experiencing it.
Right.
Because I've started novels that are set in World War I, and it didn't take long to know that I need to research what I'm writing about to work. And research is key. Lisa will tell you research is key, because she does a lot of research for Cure, and to make it right, make it sound right and reasonable and true.
I think that's one of the hardest parts, is not to for anything that is not present day in this current moment, is figuring out, okay, what do I need to research? What do I need to understand to make this ring true to whomever is going to be reading it? And that can be everything from culturally, it could be relationship wise, it can be environment, it can be time period. And it's so especially if you love research, and I'm one of those nerds that I do, it is so easy to go down this rabbit hole and just keep, looking up stuff and watching interviews and, reading things. And, if you're lucky enough to get access to someone who's an expert in different fields, having a chat with them and finding out, like, well, is this something that could actually happen? Because it just sounds cool to me. Like and oftentimes, even if you do have an actual structure to your novel, I think on almost anybody who does come at it from having a structure and key plot points will tell you, what you put down as your original plot points, it is nothing like what the final result is going to be, because as you're writing it, you discover all of these things not only about the environment and the cultures and, you know, what occurred during that period, but also your characters will tell you what's important and what's not, and why it's important and why should they care, right? And that, I mean, to me, that's what actually makes it 100 times more interesting, is to have it where, you know, you reach a point in the book, and you know, you as the writer are sitting there going, gosh, I wonder what's going to happen next. And you sit down and start writing, and, you know, next thing you know, I think to what Peter was pointing out before, you know, next thing you know, someone's, you know, shooting up, you know, a grocery store or something, like something so where you're like, where the hell did that come from? You know, like, and what made me put these thank God they're just characters, you know, into this like horrific situation, you know, but then it's also figuring out like, okay, so now that I put them in the situation, what does that mean? Right? Like, how are these other characters how are they going to respond to or interact with, or how are they going to, what does this mean to them? And how does that then impact the rest of the story? And oftentimes that's the hardest part, is especially when you're doing revision, is if you're not a pure pantser and you are, you know, you do plot out, you know, your key plot points, it's those responses, no matter the point of view that you're writing in, that's what can really turn a story on its head. And you have to figure out like, okay, well now what does this mean, right? And where can this go now? So but you know, especially with research, going back to the original point, I think like for me, because I easily can go down rabbit holes, I end up putting notes, like look up, you know, what a wolf puppy is typically named or called, you know, in the Castilian period or in the Middle Ages or whatever, right? Because, you know, obviously I'm not going to write in Castilian Spanish, but I want to use certain key words that were used during that period to basically give a hint to the reader as to that period, and to add that little additional flavor that you're kind of looking for to evoke those who may be familiar with that period. So, but if I sit down and decide I'm going to research this now, if it takes more than like 2 minutes, I just put a note in that draft to go back and look it up more, and then I keep going, because otherwise it's just I could spend hours doing it. Wow, we're already halfway through. So guys, if you are watching, just a gentle reminder that this is Run Wild with Us, Ask Us Anything. I'm Lisa Kastner. I am one of the acquisition editors, along with Ben and Peter, who are, well, we're in charge of some of the stuff that comes through Running Wild and their imprints, Running Wild, Rise, and Monstrous Books. And we are here with you on Wednesdays between 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. 9 p.m. Eastern time, to answer any old questions that you may have. And Caroline says, how do each of you feel about a common way of describing characters or using a comment from the past that is true to the period, but today not politically correct? Well, I mean, I never go first, so I'll go first, and then I'll put these two on the hot seat. So in my opinion, the most effective way of doing that, if it's something that you feel is not politically correct, is that you leverage it as a way to add flavor to the characters that you have already created within the story. So you don't have it as part of the narrator speech. You have it part of like a dialogue between two characters, or like the inner thoughts of a character who would that non-popular viewpoint, or that what would be considered unacceptable way of speech, have it said by someone in that narrative who would naturally do it. Because then otherwise, guess what? Technically speaking, I mean, although you're not the narrator, you kind of are the narrator. So it could easily be misconstrued that you're the one who has those viewpoints. I mean, unless you do, and then, well, oh well, tough crap. So I don't know. Ben, Peter, what do you guys think?
I think I like couching it in dialogue or inner thought as well, because that way it's not a statement. It's a character's thought or reaction to an event or to a proposed or perceived slight, as it were. There's a reaction to that, or if that's just their attitude about everything. I mean, there's also different ways to work it in without actually using the profane language, or without using the malapropisms that are so common to everyday speech, and just kind of throw a reference to it. But if you want to hit hard, hit hard. I mean, just put it to a point where it's not an author statement. Even if it's the narrator saying it, if the narrator is like that throughout the book, then you only need to sprinkle that in here and there sporadically for the audience or the reader to know that that's this character's attitude. That's their outlook on life, and it doesn't have to be hammered home with every sentence, with every speech that they give, or with every thought pattern that they give. That's what I would say. Either gently allude to it, or if you're gonna come right out and narrate the sequence of violence or whatever, or culturally insensitive thing you're thinking about, make it pop and then walk away from it, because you've already made your statement.
Yeah, I agree with that. What you're looking for as a writer is social tension. And you can write social tension without using racial slurs or unnice words that were prevalent in the 50s and 60s, if not before, way before. But if it's a period piece and people thought that way and said those things, then save them for when it really gets heated and there's no way around using that word. I think that's what Peter's talking about with the pop off the page. When when the tension is ready to explode, then that's when to use it. But if you use it before the tension explodes or the tension comes to a head, then it doesn't come to a head. It's already been foretold, and it takes away the impact of using the language. But some things are so expected. I think that's in writing. Well, that character is such and such, and so they probably get stereotyped of having those characteristics and using that language. And you can use that as leverage as well. You don't have to say it. You can let the reader's knowledge take them to that conclusion. It's like when we found out that Atticus Finch in another novel was a racist and used racist language. It would not have worked in To Kill a Mockingbird. And even though he was a product of that society, you felt the tension that he had with that society in a very natural way. So it's just good writing to avoid it until you can't. And because there's still going to be a Bob Ewell that uses the language because that's his language, and you wait for it. So I think it's a skill. Ultimately, it's a skill of tension and energy to make sure you use it when you need to, and let the reader know it's there when you don't.
Actually, I think that's a great point. Is that you can tell that someone has politically incorrect leanings without having them say, like, if they're a racist against African Americans, you don't have to have them say the N-word or a multitude of other slurs. Their behaviors, who they will and will not speak to, the situations that would be indicative of that period, that alone screams volumes. That, I think it enables the reader to actually live it, right? So they can become a part of that period and understand the viewpoint. I mean, and hopefully you're not just providing the viewpoint of the individual who is, well, as you're putting it politically incorrect. Hopefully you're just providing multiple points of view, but so that it's deeper, it's richer, right? And it's more, I don't want to say holistic, because you can't give the point of view of everybody, right? But you want to give points of view of characters that are A, significant to the story, and B, are somehow enabling that story to drive forward and be that much more compelling. And the reason I'm piggybacking on what Ben was saying is it reminded me of, from Kate's book launch last night for Alterations. The primary characters in it are actually lesbian women in Hollywood, and I don't think there's a point in and one of them, by the way, is considered a superstar from the 1920s, and at no point does Kate say, "Hey, look, here's this lesbian chick. She's got the hots for this other lesbian chick," right? Like, first of all, you'd be like, "What the hell is this dribble?" if someone did that, right? But she more so focuses on, and she uses third person quotes, I think, primarily. But she and it's, I think it's from 5 points of view, but she uses points of view that will then enable the reader to understand, the different perspectives. And when the two women get into a relationship, I mean, you can feel their attraction for one another. And one who she clearly knows that she's gay, and the other one who's kind of like, "Hey, this woman's kind of hot. I don't quite know why I'm having this response." I mean, again, I'm oversimplifying big time, but again, there are so many, even in today's society, there are a lot of people who would completely frown upon having telling a story like that. Like, it would be banned in a multitude of bookstores and libraries, and probably already has, and they can kiss off. But my point is that you want to be able to use these tools so that you draw the people in to those politically incorrect characters, so that we can better understand why they're behaving the way they are, if that makes sense. So,
and I think POV is an interesting way to play with it. It's and I use a technique in an old e-novel, The Kill Gene, about soldiers in Germany. Mm-hmm. And the antagonist was being described by the people he was antagonized by, or the people who he antagonized. And they said he was from Georgia and he's a cracker. And so now I don't have to tell you anything that he says. You already know. So it came from a different POV, from the black soldiers describing the white soldier, instead of saying, well, let's make this white soldier really evil, but by having him say things or do things. But it's summed up by what the black soldier said and what they thought. You don't need any description beyond that, and it's clear, it's crisp, and the reader gets it. So I know what that means. And I know his thoughts. I know what his language is. I know who he is now. But it's based on a POV shift from a kind of a third party looking into the antagonist and his character.
Well, and that's actually a great example of the author switching to the perspective and effectively using a politically incorrect term, cracker, right? Mm-hmm. At least I've never heard anyone say it with love. So, but that is definitely an example.
It doesn't carry the weight of political incorrectness that Caroline's talking about, mm-hmm. and the words that come from the mouth of others. But yeah, it's maybe softer, but still not. It's not a term of endearment.
No, not in the society I was raised in.
Yeah.
Wow, great question, Caroline. And of course, as soon as my cat hears us all like laughing, she's like, "No, I am the center of the planet." I was going to ask you guys something, but now, of course, it just like, oh, how do you feel about? I mean, you see a lot more today, novels that are written in third person close, with each chapter dividing up the point of view. Like one point of view is one chapter, another point of view is another chapter. How do you feel about it when the points of view actually shift within the chapter itself? So not quite omniscient.
Because it gets confusing. And it's almost as bad as changing the tense, the verb tense.
Mm.
And we're from present tense to past tense in the same paragraph. And it I think it can be done, but it's got to be done skillfully.
Mm.
and routinely. It can't just be a one and done throughout the story. I think it's got to be a technique that the reader picks up on and says, "Oh, I see what you're doing, and I'll go with you." Because if the reader doesn't see what you're doing, they're not going to go with you, and they're going to put the book down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was going to say, if it's done well, if you're doing it for a reason, like there may be a reason that, like mid-chapter, that all of a sudden the character has an immediate reaction, and you want to see what their reaction is, see what their thought is to the events that just unfolded. But I mean, you have to do it skillfully. You can't just do it flippantly and say, "Oh, well, he just thought this." Like you're messing up the reader. You're throwing them out. And like I tell my authors, if you throw your reader out for a second, they're still out of your story. So they have to figure out what's going on, then take the time to get back in, get their place in the flow going. So you got to make sure you know what you're doing. So if there's a reason for it, if it's like a rickshaw kind of effect, like what the hell happened, and then you go back to the main, the original, the paragraph's main character, it can be done, but it needs to be done carefully.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree. I've actually seen it done both ways. I've seen it where it was done really effectively, like, and it was like paragraph to paragraph, basically, one point of view to another, and the transition has to be intentional, right? That it has to be done intentionally within the paragraph. It has to be done consistently. And I've also seen it where all of it was like, in one point of view, and then all of a sudden there's like just one section that's a different point of view, and then you keep reading, and either you get totally thrown out of it, and it's like, well, what was supposed to happen, right? And I actually had an author a few years ago that did that, and I ended up going back to him saying, you need to let's figure out together another way to get the point across that you're trying to get across here, because it's just not working, right? Mm-hmm. Anyone who reads this, you haven't given them enough of that internal dialogue that the character they tossed in mid novel for them to actually buy into what you're doing. So either you have to do it throughout, or we need to find another way for this to be done. And I think they actually just ended up cutting out that section. It decided like it wasn't that imperative to the overall story. So
you can also, I mean, books are books, and they become more malleable as time's gone on. But with the book that I'm reading right now, The Mighty Red by Louise Erdrich, I mean, her chapters are like sometimes just a page long. So I mean, you could jump between characters really quickly like this while still maintaining flow and character development. So, like you said, you can do it's your novel. You can do whatever you like.
That's true, as long as it works. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? Yeah, that's true.
Well, Louise Erdrich, I found a couple typos in there, but other than that, it's been a really good read.
Caroline says, always have to make sure you're bringing the reader along. Good point. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's funny. I was asked to speak at a Writers Guild in the last couple months, and they had a breakout session, and all the attendees had the opportunity to pick, who they wanted to have more like small group interaction with. And one of them was like, okay, I'm planning on hiring an editor. And my question back was, well, how far along are you in this? And, you know, what are you doing to decide on what editor you choose? And so they went into this, you know, big diatribe explaining, you know, what they thought they needed to do and the kind of editor they needed and everything. And they were like, well, what do you think? And I said, honestly, if I were you, I would just find whoever your bestie is who likes the kind of writing that you do and have them read it. Because at the end of the day, it comes down, does the reader like it? And if you find somebody who is into that kind of story and they're like, ew, and they can give you a great reason why they were like, ew, then, you know, you got to think about it, right? I mean, there is you know, and this is going to horrify anybody who watches us and they're more on the literary side, but you know, there's a reason why, you know, books like Twilight were popular. There was something in it that kept the reader coming back, you know, and who cares if they're sparkly vampires? I don't care, you know. And honestly, that was like one paragraph reference, I think a third of the way through the story, and that was it. And the fact that so many people glommed onto it was, in my opinion, hilarious. But you know, it was just a fun, easy read, and that's all they were looking for. They just wanted a fun, easy read, you know. So just, you know, always keep that in mind. Like, what kind of reader are you actually trying to engage, and are you interested in inviting to come back, right? Because in reality, when you're writing a great story with fabulous characters, you're inviting the reader to keep coming back. So you get to decide. I think back to a point that Peter was making earlier. It's your story. You can do whatever you want. And that includes you're actively deciding who your audience is based on what you're writing, how you're writing, and how you're executing it. So. Wow, I can't believe it. We only have like 9 minutes left. That's crazy.
So I got something to share.
Okay.
So I got a note from one of my authors of this book that I sent back to her earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
And her comment was, she found a comment I gave her, confused her. On page 26, she used light disparagingly. Was this in reference to highlighted text or somewhere else? Just like this bit more elaboration so I could see what the issue is. Mm-hmm. So I had no idea what she meant because it's been 6 months since I read the book. So, okay. So I looked it up. And in one page, she goes, this very common phrase, when she entered a room, is like turning on a light. Okay? Normal, easy enough to explain, to envision. It's just in the previous page, she used light disparagingly. When she goes, I paused to turn down a light that was guttering orange flame and sooting up the wall. Now, in my mind, as an editor, to use it that strong of an image, turning on a light that soots up a wall, guttering orange, bad context, bad image, bad this, bad that, and now 1 page later, 3 paragraphs later, it's like turning on a light. It's like, well, now you've just tainted the word light. You've just turned it into a negative tone. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong. This is just what came to my mind. It was too close to each other for me to say, okay, I can let that pass. I just want to call attention to it, saying that because you just use this in this manner, you might want to rethink using the same exact word in an opposite manner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and now you've tainted that character. You've tainted the light, and now the character that turns on the light when they come in the room, or comes in the room like turning on a light.
Right.
The same characteristics are assumed or applied, projected. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. It's very valid. Mm-hmm. And the author still didn't know that she had done it.
No.
And didn't make the connection. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your response?
I'm just gonna say exactly close to what I just said now.
Oh, okay.
It's like if you use it, I'll explain it to her. Use it a negative connotation just 3 paragraphs ago, and now the reader's saying, okay, light is bad, light staining the wall, staining the wall, staining the wall. Well, now this woman with whom she's in love, now she comes in, she turns on a room she turns on a light that's just gonna soot up the wall and guttering orange and yuck. You've crossed your
metaphor.
Images. Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Unintentionally. I think if the perspective of that character was negative, it would work.
Exactly.
It'd be a nice touch. It'd be a very subtle touch, but nice.
And
But if that's not what you meant, then you can't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And could I let that pass? Of course I could let that pass. But I mean, something like that is something that you can key onto on a subconscious level that you don't even realize you're thinking it, but also, like we were saying, it taints the character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, just us like kind of bartering around. I actually was recently asked to talk to a high school senior who wants to become a publisher, which blew my mind because I thought, what? I don't know anybody who, when they were in high school, said, I know what I want to do. I want to be a publisher. But she was asking me really basic questions like, like what's it like to be an editor and how do you make your decisions and things like that. And I realized that, well, I didn't realize in that moment, but I'd known from before, the way that small presses approach things compared to mid-size and compared to large are so drastically different that I try to give her a fuller perspective. And I have a dear friend who had commented, more times than not, if you go to a small press, what you're going to see, it's really more so art, right? So we're focusing on the craft of writing oftentimes when we're giving responses. And, we're focusing on the quality of the writing itself and the quality of the story versus, if someone's submitting something, or if you're an editor for a large house, especially, they have a very specific way of doing things that you must follow. And that is for both the author as well as for the editor. Whereas when we give feedback, a lot of times it comes back to, do what you think is best. I say that so many times because there are so many ways that you could actually accomplish whatever it is. The author could accomplish whatever it is that they want to, but it has to make sense, right? So, to go back to, I think, to Peter's point, if what she was doing was consistent and it made sense for the overall story, then fabulous, right? But the fact that it didn't, it made itself kind of like, it called itself out. And it pulled the reader out of the story, or it could pull the reader out of the story, then it doesn't work. And, again, unless she comes back with something, well, like, here was the intent of it. This is what I wanted to accomplish. Then our jobs as editors is A, help her realize how she had just basically gone against what she was saying previously, and B, help her figure out how to fix it, And my cat's back because I clearly spoke for too long. Oh, Taz, like, Lisa, are you okay? You seem low on energy and you have a lot on mind. I am tired. I admit that. I've been yawning quite a bit. But yeah, no, I'm just tired. But thank you for checking on me. And I do seem to be a little bit more of talkative this evening for whatever reason. So, but no, I'm fine. Thank you again. Thank you for checking on me. And my cat's like, God damn you. So, anyway, wow. All right. Well, I think we have what, like a minute left or something. So I don't know. Ben, is there anything that you want to toss out there to folks?
Oh, just today I got a rejection letter for a collection of poems, or rejection email, but it was one of the nicest and most encouraging that anybody could ever want, and they even recommended that I submit poems to a journal that they knew of, and so they were very, very kind in their rejection, and it goes a long way to get a rejection letter and feel the same as if it was accepted.
Cool.
Awesome.
How about you, Peter? Do you have anything?
Keep at it. Just keep at it.
Excellent. All right. Well, then with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. As always, it is completely a pleasure. And we will see you guys this time next week. Awesome.